Good day, interns and tutors. My name is Dr. Rianda Joubert. I am a moderator of Portfolio of Evidence activities for interns, and I will guide you through this feedback session of this year. To give you a short overview of this presentation, we're going to talk about why we have this session. We're going to look at the structure of the presentation, common mistakes and omissions, as well as problematic competency standards, the way forward, and then if you have any questions, you're welcome to send it through to council. We're going to look at generic issues as well as some specific issues. Firstly then, why do we have this session? So, as you can remember, in February and March, we had the intern tutor training session, and that session is very content heavy. And it is often difficult to see the relevance before you have actual involvement with the portfolio of evidence entries. But by this time, all interns are now familiar with the system, the format, and the requirements of the competency standards, and you have received feedback from the assessors. The assessors, the moderators, as well as the interns are now able to share your experiences and our experiences with you. How are you feeling while listening to this presentation and after submitting some of your portfolio of evidence activities? Some of you might feel furious or angry, some of you might cry, some of you are just confused, and hopefully there are a few of you that feels that you are doing things right and that you are happy with the way things are going for you. So this workshop is not only for those of you who feel angry and frustrated and sad, but also those of you who are happy, and to make sure that you know how to go forward and to continue with your good work. So throughout this presentation, you will see we're going to link slides to the previous workshops, the training workshops that were held in February and March, and that workshops is available on the SAPC website. So on some slides, you will see a little B, and there will be a speech bubble with a slide number in, and that slide number referred to the slide number of the intern and tutor workshop presentation. So you can always go back to that specific workshop and that specific slide and go and have a look at what the information was that we gave you then. We have also made use of these two little bees, the one holding the red sign with a cross and the other one with a thumbs up. The one with the thumbs up gives you guidelines and suggestions and show that things are doing right, or how can you do it right, how can you avoid or fix your errors. And the bee on the left hand side with the red sign with the cross in is where we're going to give the description of the common errors or mistakes that we see that you often make. If appropriate, we have also included specific messages for tutors, and those are usually provided in this yellow speech bubble. So firstly, we're going to look at some generic issues, mistakes and omissions that you make or that we see. And we're going to look at each of the CPD phases or the portfolio of evidence phases every step. And first thing is that you need to make sure that the information is entered against the correct phase on the CPD system. And for that, you can refer to slide 12 in the training workshop with the learning title. And the learning titles information you can find on slide 14 of the February-March workshop. So it's important that you make sure that your title reflects the competency standard and that the title is in your own words and not a copy of the wording of the competency standard. You must make sure that your title includes a description of the activity, and your title must be concise. Make sure that you do not address one behavioral statement in the title, that it is not too long, and that, as I've said, very important that it is not a copy of the wording of the competency standard. What goes hand in hand with the title is the reflection, and the reflection is addressed on slides 15 and 16. So make sure that the chosen competency standard is the correct one for your learning need. And you need to include a trigger incident, meaning what happened that made you realize you need to learn to do something new. The focus should be on the competency and the behavioral statements. So you need to state your learning need in terms of the skills needed for the competency standard. You need to say what you will do with what you have learned. So in other words, what you will achieve after you have addressed this learning need. Make sure that your learning need is not the learning need of your patients or the other healthcare professionals, but it is your learning need. And the focus should not be just on the theory of the subject matter, but on the activity itself, on the skill that you want to learn. For example, if you do 5.3, don't just focus on the Schedule 6 prescription. Rather, you must focus on the ethical and legal practices of applying the acts and other aspects within that competency standard. So make sure that your learning trigger, your learning need is clearly identified and that you have chosen the correct competency standard. Is the planning step. And the planning is addressed on slide 18 of the Tutor Intern workshop in the beginning of the year. Make sure that you use the behavioral statements to guide your planning, because in the end, that is what you need to provide evidence for that you can do that. Remember that you must include resources and references, and that it must be specific. So you need to add the chapter or the section or the page numbers where appropriate. It should also be written in the future tense, because it is something that you will still do. It is not only what you are going to do, but also why you are using the chosen resources. So it's important to include that rationale for using the resources. Planning should not be too general in description or superficial or insufficient. Often interns struggle with differentiating between planning and implementation, and then it results in duplication of what was written in the planning and the implementation. So make sure that your planning does not talk to implementation. Your planning should be descriptive of the activity and not just be a general description. So ask yourself, have I written this in future tense? Is the reasoning behind the resources there? Have I provided specific details of the resources? And have I linked it to 75% and above of the behavioral statements? It's always important to look at the assessment grid or the criteria for assessment in your manual when you complete a portfolio of evidence activity. Let's move on to the third step, which is the implementation step. And everything about implementation can be found on slide number 19 in the Tutor Intern Training Workshop presentation. Often we find that the implementation is not supported by the evidence. So your text would say what was done, but there's no evidence to support this. Or you have provided evidence, but you did not give a description or an annotation to why it is included. There's no link to the evidence in the implementation discussion, and there's also no link to the behavioral statements in the implementation discussion. So you need to link your evidence and the behavioral statements in the discussion to the evidence. For example, I applied the SOP, you will written in the implementation, but the evidence only shows an unannotated SOP. You don't show us how you have applied it. So make sure that you provide evidence for all the resources that you've mentioned in the planning and the implementation. So if you say you're going to use the GPP section 2.18 in your evidence and your implementation, we want to see the GPP section 2.18 annotated and described how you have used that. Include links to the evidence in the implementation discussion. Remember to include links to the behavioral statement in the implementation. Remember that just a copy of the SOP does not provide evidence for application. So just by putting in the SOP there and highlight the number of steps does not mean that you can apply the SOP. You need to have additional evidence to show us that application. And important, the completion date must be the date after the completion of the activity. For example, if you said you did counseling on the 25th of May, then your completion date should be after that. So if we look at the evidence that needs to be included in the implementation phase, be aware that you don't give blanket evidence for the complete competency standard or for more than one behavioral statement. In other words, you put a piece of evidence in and you say at the top, this evidence is evidence for behavioral statement A, B, C, D, and E. That is not correct if you do it like that. You must indicate what on that evidence is, or on that piece of evidence or in that resource is linked to A, what piece or area is linked to B, etc. Make sure that your evidence is not insufficient so that it is sufficient. Be careful not to use the same evidence in multiple competency standards. And with this, we mean the same prescription. Say, for example, for 3.4 and 5.3. It is obviously that you will use the same resources or that you will use in multiple activities, for example, the GPP, the acts, the SOPs, etc. But the way you apply it, the examples of application should be different. And make sure that patient confidentiality is not breached. So make sure that you provide evidence for each separate behavioral statement and err on the side of caution. Rather add more pieces of evidence than too little evidence. You can still meet or achieve requirement met even if one piece of evidence is rejected. And remember that 75% of the behavioral statements must be provided evidence for if there are 4 or more behavioral statements in that competency standard. So here we have a little table just to say if you have a competency standard with 4 behavioral statements, then you need to address with the evidence 3 of those behavioral statements. That is good quality, valid, sufficient, and authentic. So make sure to check this table if you are unsure. And important, consider each behavioral statement as a standalone activity. It is not necessary, especially for competency standard 5.3, you can have multiple, activities that happened for you in order to fulfill all the behavioral statements. You might not be able to fulfill all of them with one incident that took place or one prescription. So make sure that you address or consider the behavioral statements as standalone activities. For evidence, you can look at slides 25 to 35, where we have explained everything from annotation, what it is, how it should look like, what is sufficient, authentic, current, and valid evidence. You can all find it there on slides 25 to 35. And just again, evidence have the highest weighting. So if your evidence is not successful, then your whole activity is not yet successful. If we look specific at annotation errors, we often see that there's insufficient or no annotation, that it is messy or unclear, that you have ambiguous labeling of evidence, and that the evidence is annotated as relevant to multiple behavioral statements. We often see that with competency standard 1.1, where you will design a poster or a pamphlet with information on, and then next to that poster or pamphlet, you will say, this addresses, or this is the poster that I've created and that I have presented to my patients at the OPD, and this addresses A, B, C, and D. And then you will get a comment of which part on the poster is linked to A, which part is linked to B. So you need to make sure that you link to specific behavioral statements. We also see that you should ensure that you show application of evidence. Example for 4.6, you should show how the evidence was applied for SOP and policy. So make sure that each piece of evidence is linked to a specific behavioral statement. Ensure that your annotation is detailed and neat. You need to show how the evidence meets the requirement of each behavioral statement. You should avoid using A, B, and C as evidence label. Refer rather to the specific behavioral statement instead. Link your separate pieces of evidence for each behavioral statement. And as I've said previously, clearly show which part of that was the uploaded evidence is relevant. Remember to include a title, a date, and a verification, specifically on attendance registers, etc. And very important, pay attention to confidentiality. So if we move on to the appropriateness of evidence, you can find information on that in slides 32 and 33 of the previous workshop. It is most important to annotate or link the relevance of the uploaded material to a specific behavioral statement. And I've said that a lot of times now. You must ensure that your evidence is valid, so it is relevant to the competency standard that you have selected, that it is accurate and logical, and important that it is factually correct. Example, when you do calculations, make sure that your calculation is correct. Also make sure that you use the most recent and up-to-date acts and legislation and regulations, and not just old board notices or old pieces of legislation. Make sure that your evidence is authentic and that it is not made up. We often see that there was a comment made that there was no attendance register attached to the domain, or that there's no evidence of actual counseling of a patient, etc. And then with the resubmission, it's the exact same activity, and now suddenly there appears an attendance register, or there appear a patient counseling sheet where the patient signed. Then we often think, but is this real? Did this really happen? So make sure that you do not make up any evidence. Make sure that your evidence is legible and it's not blurry. We can't assess or moderate evidence if we cannot read what is written on there, that it is not uploaded upside down, that it is arranged or sequenced in a logical manner. Don't, if you do 3.5, which is compounding, start with the final product and then you have the SOP and then you have the material. So make sure that it follows in a logical manner, and that it is submitted as one document. That is very important. Step in the cycle is the evaluation step. You will find information on the evaluation on slide number 20. And here you need to explain, what have I learned? Not what did you do, but what have you learned from this activity? How has this impacted your practice? And you must explain how it has impacted on your practice. And you must give us an example of how you have applied your new competency or the new skill that you have gained. And it must be a specific example. And it must be different than what you did in that specific portfolio of evidence activity. So if you counsel the patient on the correct use of an inhaler, then your example should be something else. You counsel the patient on the use of antibiotics. Remember, it is about the skill that you've gained, not the product or the disease, etc. It's the skill that you have mastered. And then you should also identify a future learning need in terms of the skill. It should be different from the implementation scenario, and it should occur after the implementation. You should not only say how you will use this new skill in future. It must be a concrete and clear future learning need. It should be related to the competency standard or the domain, but if you have provided counseling on the use of an inhaler, you cannot say you want to counsel someone on how to use an insulin pen because it was counseling. It was not about the inhaler, it was about the counseling. Then you can say, I've counseled the patient now on the use of an inhaler. In future, I would like to learn how to consult with a prescriber, or I would like to learn how to do pharmacist-initiated therapy. So you see, it still relates to the domain in which you are. We have gone through the 4 steps. We're going to look at some other issues that we see. And the first one that we're going to look at is writing style. And here you will see now the first yellow block. And this is for the tutors. Your tutors need to provide you feedback on writing style errors. If they verify your activity online, they should just look out for inappropriate language use, incomplete sentences, professional writing, etc. But you must also make sure that the language that you use is appropriate. It's appropriate for the setting that you're in, that your sentences are complete, that you capitalize at the beginning of a sentence, that your writing is professional, and make sure to proofread. Remember that when you submit online, it's not auto-corrected. So it's always better to type in Word and then put on the spell check and make sure that it is, if you copy it, that it is correct. And for more information on writing style and what we expect, you can look at slides number 13 and 60 in the training presentation. Aspect that is also very important is breach of confidentiality. Remember, if you breach patient confidentiality, the not yet competent automatically applied. Confidentiality is really, really important. If you break confidentiality, it's a serious breach of professionalism. And make sure to watch out for patient details in other places than just on labels. And with patient confidentiality, we mean it includes everything on all means by which a patient can be identified. In other words, a photo, a signature, a cell phone number, a file number. And often, if you cannot make out the person's name or surname in the signature, it's fine. But if the signature is just his surname written out, then you need to block that out. Make sure that if you use text boxes to obscure patient details, that they have not moved if you convert your document to a PDF version, because even if you have intended to protect patient confidentiality, if that box moves, then you have breached patient confidentiality. And important to not unnecessarily block out information, such as the prescriber details, staff members, names. Remember, in the training workshop, we said that patient confidentiality or confidentiality only applies to patients and not to healthcare professionals or your colleagues. You can go onto the HPCSA website and look up a doctor's information there. You can go to Council's website and look up a registered person's information there. So unless it is something that will breach intellectual property, if you're in manufacturing, then you should not cover hospital names, pharmacy names, doctors' names, etc. For more information on the confidentiality, you can look at slide number 61. The thing we're going to look at is resubmissions, and information on resubmissions is also available in the intern and tutor training workshop, slides 57 to 59. Often we see entries resubmitted without any changes, and the outcome will then also not change. So again, here for the tutors, check that the entry has been improved before verifying or validating a resubmission. And important that you never ignore the assessor's comments. Don't bank on shortcomings being ignored the second time around. Remember, your activities get sent to the same assessor every time. So don't think that someone else will see the resubmission and might feel different. It's the same person that will see it. Then you need to decide if the not yet successful entry needs an amendment or a replacement. It's always better to replace, unless the comment was breach of patient confidentiality is the only issue. Then you can just cover that patient's name or all the information of the patient and it would be successful. But usually it is better to replace your entire activity. And important to address all the comments in the phases of the cycle. Don't just look at the comments and see that the evidence was the major issue and now you leave the rest as it was and you just add some evidence, because that is when fabrication of evidence becomes an issue. And remember that each submission or resubmission is assessed as a complete standalone entry. So don't think you can just add one piece of evidence in a second document and we will go back and look at the previous evidence. It is not, we start from scratch. And important to remember to change the date of completion to the new date. Because often if you have to start over and now you say your previous achievement date was, for example, 30 March, and now you have to redo that activity, and now you say on the 5th of May, I received the prescription and I was unsure to what. Then your achievement date can't be the 30th of April anymore. It must be after the 5th of May. So make sure about the date of completion. Some more on resubmissions. We often see entries resubmitted with incorrect or unacceptable changes. So make sure that you don't falsify or add or create missing evidence that was already assessed. As I've said, attendance registers, patient history, expiry dates, batch manufacturing records, counseling feedback, training plan, etc. There's a lot of things, so make sure that you don't add or create or falsify the evidence. And it's important that you are clear about what is required when your entry requires a resubmission. So make sure that you go through all the comments and talk to your tutor and ask your tutor for guidance so that you are sure and confident in what you need to change in order to be successful on a resubmission. In the next couple of slides, we're going to look at problematic competency standards. And you will remember in the intern and tutor training workshop in the beginning of the year, we said that some competency standards are recommended, some are possible, and some are challenging, and that those who are challenging is best to be avoided. That information you can find from slide 63 and onwards. So in the following few slides, we're going to look at competency standards from each domain that was submitted by interns and the omissions or the mistakes or the problems that we have identified there. But firstly, if you look at the competency standard, make sure to read it through and the complete competency standard, and then ask yourself before you start, can I provide sufficient evidence for the behavioral statements underneath that competency standard? So if we look at domain 1, which is public health, it must be important, you must remember that it implies activities that target or benefit a larger community audience, not single patients in a pharmacy, but a larger community audience. You should also remember to think clearly about what constitutes health promotion and primary health care. And some of the concepts that we get in this domain are often confused and not clearly understood. The first one is a health campaign. because for 1.1 behavioral statement D is you have to participate in a health campaign. So for a health campaign, there's certain steps that you need to go through. So you first need to identify the health need, then you need to prepare the intervention, then you need to deliver the intervention to the target audience, and then you must assess the effectiveness of the intervention. So don't decide to do a campaign for child immunization, but your target audience is elderly people at a old age home. So it must be a target audience and it must be focused. So make sure that you have the correct audience before you and not just any audience, and follow the steps to design and compile a health campaign. We focus specifically on competency standard 1.1, which is promotion of health and wellness. We often see an audience of individual patients or that you describe the colleagues. And that is not correct. It should not be individual patients. It should also not be a randomly chosen target audience, which is not relevant to the health message. You should not submit any group work, and there's no mention of the skill that was learned. So don't forget that domain 1 is about public health, and you need to show how you interacted with the target audience. You need to describe how you have developed the materials to meet health promotion requirements and that it is relevant to the health message. And you need to include sufficient activities to constitute a health campaign. And only your own contribution to the activity. So what was your role if you have a big campaign where all the personnel in the pharmacy participated in? What was your contribution, your own contribution to the activity, and how did you interact with the public? So make sure about that. If we move to domain 2, then we're going to look at competency standard 2.2, which is patient counseling. So first, it's important that you establish the patient's understanding of his or her disease or the medicine that he needs to use. If you look at behavioral statement A, it mentions establishing existing understanding and knowledge of health conditions, medicines used for a patient, and the need for counseling. That is not your understanding and knowledge and your need to counsel. It is the patient's understanding and knowledge of health conditions and the medicines and the need for counseling. So that is what we want to see there. How did you establish that you did that? So you need to include patient feedback, which should be dated and signed to verify that the counseling actually took place. You need to include your notes taken during the counseling session. Don't provide a typed out dialogue of what was said between you and the patient. That doesn't happen in real time. Often you do this, and I know you go home and tonight or next week or in a month, then you start to write up, and now you have to figure out a dialogue and you can just think out anything. So make notes during the counseling session. What did you ask the patient, and what did you tell the patient, and what did they tell you? And you also need to provide a counseling plan, and that should be specific, a patient-specific counseling plan. The focus is on interaction with the patient and not only on the medicines. So often we will see a lot of evidence from EM guidance or package information leaflets or the SAMF about the medicine, but there's very little actual evidence of the interaction with the patient. Remember that an uploaded photo does not prove that counseling took place. So you can't just say, put a photo in you behind the counter and the patient in front of you with his or her face blocked out, and you say, yeah, I am providing counseling. That does not prove anything. You must check that you have covered sufficient number of behavioral statements, and you must also include evidence that show active and reflective listening during your counseling. And it's important that you show application of the skills. A lot of interns put in textbooks or notes on how they learned to, or what is active and reflective listening, but there's no evidence that actually took place. So don't submit a lot of evidence with no links to the behavioral statements, and often many of the behavioral statements is not met. And as I've said previously, make sure that you address the complete behavioral statement and not just a part of it. Example of what to consider when you counsel a patient on an insulin pen and align it to the behavioral statements in 2.2. So the intern will focus on what they know about insulin pen and the use thereof, rather than the skill of performing counseling. And that should include the use of verbal and non-verbal counseling, active and reflective listening techniques, establishing the patient's understanding, develop a counseling plan that is suited to the needs of the patient. And often we see that interns counsel a patient that has been on insulin for a long time because it was just your learning need to counsel, although the patient there's no need for the patient have already received counseling on the use. So make sure what it is that you need to counsel, and that there's a need from the patient's side to receive counseling. Yes, it should be your learning need to learn how to counsel, but it should also be the patient's need, that they don't know, that they don't understand this disease. It's a newly diagnosed patient. They don't know how to use it. They've never used it before. So there must be a need for counseling as well. From domain 2, we're also going to look at 2.6, which is pharmacist-initiated therapy. And what is very important here is that PIT is pharmacist-initiated, not patient-initiated therapy. In other words, the patient asks for Benylin for flu. That is a patient-initiated. They requested that. Or the patient asked for emergency postcoital contraception. That is not pharmacist-initiated therapy. Pharmacist-initiated therapy is the patient entered the pharmacy and complained about, and then they list the symptoms. That is pharmacist-initiated therapy. So make sure that you take the full patient history, report it fully. If you want to submit a dialogue, it must be verified, and that's difficult to do because you type out the dialogue after the patient have left the pharmacy. So it's better to put down notes. I always advise interns to make themselves a patient assessment sheet where they can fill in everything and they can take down the history, and the patient can sign, and by signing it, they verify that the information is correct. Remember that pharmacist-initiated therapy is guided by patients' subjective and objective signs and symptoms, and that you need to document those clearly. And then often interns do not address behavioral statement B, which is referring patients when required to an appropriate healthcare provider or resource. If you want to provide a referral letter, that letter must be verified by your tutor or the RP. And again, here we often see that interns only address a part of the behavioral statements. They will do documenting any intervention, then they will put in the blue copy or the script copy, and they will say this is how I documented it, but they fail to add according to current legislative requirements. Or assessing and treating a patient based on objective and subjective signs and symptoms as guided by relevant legislation and within the scope of practice. Then they will just list the signs and symptoms, all of them, and then they skip the relevant legislation and the scope of practice part. So make sure that you address the complete SOP. Not SOP, behavioral statement. Okay, if we move to domain 3, the next competency standard we're going to look at is 3.4, which is medicine dispensing. And here it is very important to consider the behavioral statement requirements as standalone activities. You will see there are 9 behavioral statements, and often we see insufficient evidence to cover 75% of the behavioral statements, and that would be 7 of the behavioral statements. And often it is only A, which is the validation of the prescription that is covered. And usually E and F, preparing extemporaneous preparations and performing pharmaceutical calculations accurately, are the 2 that is not addressed. So if you do not address E and F, then you need to address all 7 of the others in order to have sufficient evidence. We often see outdated or incorrect reference that is used for prescription validity and authenticity. Often we see antibiotic reconstitution submitted for compounding. It is not. It should be extemporaneous compounding or preparations that is compounded extemporaneously, meaning patient-specific, and it is not antibiotic reconstitution. Then we often see that interns just determine the number of doses or the number of tablets to dispense and consider that as a pharmaceutical calculation. That is not a pharmaceutical calculation. Pharmaceutical calculations is where you have to determine the dose according to weight, or you have to do ratios or dilutions, etc. So make sure that you do not just say your prescription, say 1 tablet BD for 5 days, and then you need to calculate that is 10 tablets that you need to dispense. That is not a pharmaceutical calculations. And often the references regarding dosages and the appropriateness of medication are not submitted. So if you address C and you perform a therapeutic review of a prescription to ensure the pharmaceutical and clinical appropriateness of the treatment, we want to see the reference or the resource that you have used for that. So it is important that you cover sufficient evidence, that you cover 7 of the 9 behavioral statements. And if you submit or include references, you must make sure that they are annotated clearly. Don't just put in the page from the SAMF or the screenshot of EM guidance without explaining why you have included that and what information on it that you use. The recommended competency standard from domain 3 is 3.5, which is medicine compounding. And often interns think that 3.5 is easy because there's only 1 behavioral statement. And that is definitely not true. It's not true that this is easy, because you need to show and apply pharmaceutical knowledge. That is the behavioral statement, is to apply pharmaceutical knowledge. And that often does not happen. Often there's a missing or incorrect expiry date for the compounded product. And here it is important that you follow Regulation 3.1 of Act 101 of 1965 for the expiry date, which state that a product should only be or should expire after 30 days after compounding. If your institution uses longer expiry dates, you should comment on how this does not fulfill the regulation, and if they have done their own stability testing, you must provide that. Not stability testing that you found in an article published in 1960. It must be we work according to legislation. Your evidence must prove your actions. So it must be clear what you have done and how you've done it. You must make sure that that all the steps of the compounding process was followed and that you followed pharmaceutical principles and that you've submitted everything. Calculations must be checked carefully before you submit. Often we see that there's no compounding guidelines included, so make sure that you include those guidelines, the GPP or the SOP, cross-reference between your application of your or the actual compounding and those resources. And then interns do not always know what the difference is between a 1-in-4 dilution and a 1-to-4 dilution. So make sure that you know what is the difference, if it's a 1-in-4 or a 1-to-4 dilution. And important, if you label your product, you should label your product. You also need to evaluate your label. And that you will find in Regulation 10 of the Medicines and Regulatory Substances Act. A lot of interns do make a magic mouthwash, and if you put on the label magic mouthwash, then it does not comply with Regulation 10. That states that all ingredients must be stated on the label. So make sure about that. And verify the processes that you followed with the BP and the codex, etc. Also make sure that you use the correct techniques, that you don't make your mixture in the container in which you're going to dispense it, but that you use a mixing tile, for example. So make sure that you follow pharmaceutical principles clearly when you do 3.5. We move to domain 4, then we have said that 4.2 is challenging because it pertains to financial management. And with the financial management, it is more and broader than just submitting a prescription to a medical scheme for the claim. And often the focus is just on generic substitution, which is not the focus with financial management. You will see working according to the approved budget, that is the larger budget of the institution or the pharmacy. Performing cost-benefit analysis. Cost-benefit analysis is not generic substitution. So if you do generic substitution, it's not cost effectiveness and it's not cost-benefit. And often interns struggle there. So then they don't have the approved budget, they don't have cost-benefit, and then they're not successful with this activity. So rather avoid 4.2, financial management. Remember, the competency standards is written for advanced pharmacists as well, and not just interns. So it might be that a competency standard is challenging for an intern to do, and then you should avoid and not do that one. The competency standard that most interns submit in domain 4 is 4.6, and here it deals with policy development. So although it states policy development, there's only 2 behavioral statements. A says that you must apply policies, and B says apply SOPs. So you must make sure to include how you have applied an SOP, and must be linked to the specific points of the SOP, and you must indicate how you have applied a policy. Don't just put in the policy and put in the SOP and just now you have other evidence to support that, but you don't link it. And remember that SOPs and policies are not the same document, and you need to apply the complete SOP and policy. Don't just show us application of selected steps in the SOP. If you select the procurement SOP, we want to see from point A 1 right through to the end, supporting evidence for that SOP. And the same goes with the policy. And remember that the GPP, the GWP, the GMP, they are not policy documents. They are guidelines. On page 40 of the intern and tutor manual, there are a list of policies, and there's also a definition of what is an SOP and what is a policy, and there's a list of policies that you can look at that you can use for competency standard 4.6. Moving on to domain 5, and here you have to do the compulsory competency standard 5.3, which is ethical and legal practice. And often we see that there's a limited focus on dispensing or handling Schedule 6 prescriptions or Schedule 6 medicines. And interns often only consider Schedule 6 prescriptions to be relevant for ethical and legal practice. But for this competency standard, it could cover more activities because a Schedule 6 prescription cannot provide evidence for a sufficient number of the behavioral statements. Don't rely on outdated legislation. Ensure that you are using the latest and the most up-to-date legislation. I mean, competency standard 5.3 behavioral statement C says that you must keep abreast of legislation and apply the amendments, which means you must know where to look for legislation and for updates, and then you must show if there was an update, how did you apply it. Often interns fail to provide proper professional indemnity insurance. Make sure that that your indemnity certificate is up to date and that it shows that it is an intern and not a student. Some of you applied for indemnity insurance during your 4th year and it has not yet lapsed, and now the certificate still states that you're a student. The coverage for a student and an intern is different. So make sure that your certificate states that you're an intern. And often interns only focus on legal compliance and ignore the ethical considerations. So make sure that you include ethical practice guidelines as well and not just the legal aspects. And often, almost in all activities for 5.3, interns include the SOP and they consider that as legislation. The SOP is not legislation. It is a procedure that you need to follow, but it is not legislation. So rather use the legislation and not an SOP. You can add the SOP for completeness, but remember the SOP is not legislation. You should not have only that. Okay, then the last domain, domain 6, which is education, critical analysis and research. The recommended competency standards here was 6.2 and 6.6, and we said that 6.3 is also possible to do if you are an academic intern. So remember that there's a difference between 6.2 and 6.3. So if you select 6.2, you need to provide evidence for an agreed teaching or training plan. And remember, the schedule or the roster for presentations or training sessions, that is not a training plan. That is just a schedule. So a teaching plan and guidance from an experienced colleague. We will see interns submit and they say, this is my training plan, and then they have a copy of a block with the tutor's signature that they've copied and pasted, and they say that this is proof that I was guided by an experienced colleague. You need to tell us and show us who was the experienced colleagues and how did they guide you to formulate the training plan, and how was the teaching and learning materials developed. Then you should also do self-assessment, and the self-assessment should not only focus on the topic of your training, but also of your training skills. And this should be done by you as the intern, and it should be done prior to the training session. So we don't want to see self-assessment done by attendees. We want to see your own self-assessment. You need to provide evidence for the effectiveness of the training. So did it meet the outcomes that was stated? And also, as I've said, your own learning needs must be submitted. And then did you achieve those learning needs? And learning activities refers not only to a presentation that you compiled, but also to quizzes, if you did role play, any way in which you can encourage the participants to actually learn something and participate in this training session. It's important to remember that the domain requires a focus on education-related skills and not the subject matter of the training material. If you select 6.3, you must remember that this is relevant to formal education of students. In other words, B-Form students, not colleagues. It must be students, and you must provide us some evidence of the course or the module into which your training fits. Which outcomes in a module does your training addresses? So important, 6.3, if you're an academic intern, you can do this. If you are any other intern, rather select 6.2 if you want to provide training and education to colleagues or other healthcare professionals. Then one aspect that is also important that we need to talk about is plagiarism. So make sure that you do not copy other interns' works. It's not professional practice to do that. There is a plagiarism detection program that Council uses. Make sure that that report is attached. It's automatically submitted for plagiarism detection, and it must be less than 20%. So if you get the report back and it's above 20%, then you need to revise your statements and your written part of your portfolio of evidence. Okay, we are nearing the end of this presentation. So what is the way forward towards success? It's very important that you read the entire competency standard carefully. If you by now you have not realized how important this is, then I'm going to stress it again. Don't just select something and start. Read through the competency standard from the introduction, all the competency standards, the behavioral statements to the end. Use the behavioral statements because that is what you need to show that you can do and what you need to provide evidence for. Please consult the training presentations. That is why they are there. That is why it is recorded and provided again so that you can go back and listen to it again. And very important, pay attention to the assessor feedback. In the online workshop, we will do some case studies where we will look at some of the feedback and what it means. What does the feedback look like and what do we mean with those feedback? So it's important that you pay attention to the feedback and address your feedback properly, or address the feedback properly. In the way forward for tutors, tutors should please stay involved with their interns at all times. Encourage the interns to meet the deadlines. If you have not done so, print out the deadlines and put it up in the pharmacy somewhere for you and the intern to be reminded of when deadlines are near. Remember that entry validation needs you to check everything. You need to check that all the phases are completed and entered into the correct place, that the evidence is valid, that professional communication is used, and before a resubmission, if it occurs that assessor's comments are resolved. So don't just verify, but really look intense at everything. I always tell my interns to bring me their submissions or their portfolio of evidence activity before they submit, so that we can sort out those issues before. Then it saves some time when it comes to verification. We are all busy, and often interns submit close to the deadline, and then the tutor have not much time to go through. And if it should be sent back to the intern, it can lead to the intern not being able to submit on time. So please work with your intern and stay involved and keep on encouraging the interns. And on the same note, here is just a reminder of the pre-registration examination and booking dates. So we are closing, or we are nearing the open date for bookings, which is on the 22nd of June. The late bookings open on the 10th of July. The late bookings closes on the 22nd of July for the exam to be written on the 4th and the 5th of August. And remember, if you book late, you will have to pay a late booking fee after the closing date. And then if you miss the August date, then you can book for on the 9th, from the 9th of September. And the late bookings for the October exam opens on the 23rd of September. It closes on the 9th of October. And then the last exam for this year is to be written on the 20th or the 21st, 20 and 21st of October of this year. So make sure to book in time for the pre-registration examination, and again consult your intern and tutor manual for the requirements to be able to write the exam. And then just the CPDs or the POE submission deadlines. For completion, we have added the whole table here, but you can see the next deadline, last day for submission by interns is the 1st of June, and verification the 2nd of June, and your results will be released on the 22nd of June. And then those 29th of July submission, that is if you still want to be able to late book for the August exam, you should not submit or miss the 29th of July, 29 June submission deadline. Then you will still be able to write the August exam. And remember that on the 10th and subsequent submissions, a fee will be payable. A fee will be charged to you by council, and that fee can be found on council's website. Just to remind you again of the 4th National Pharmacy Conference, that it will be held in October in Durban at the ICC, the Durban ICC. So if you have not registered yet, early bird registration closes on the 31st of May, and we hope that everyone will join in this wonderful conference. If you feel you need to contact council, you can contact council either via email or their website. There's a phone number, or the official SAPC social media platforms that's available. Or you can also follow the SAPC on the SAPC's WhatsApp channel by scanning the QR code or clicking on the link and joining the WhatsApp there. Thank you everyone for your time and for listening to this presentation, and I really hope that this was helpful and that you found this informative, and we hope to see you all at the feedback workshop soon. Goodbye.